Red Dead Redemption 2 has been around for 6 years now, and players are still finding amazing, and sometimes downright crazy, details in this game, which I've collected in this compilation. So if you enjoy videos like this, show your support with a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Recently on Reddit, I stumbled across an interesting detail. In St. Denis, there's a gunsmith, and if you rudely walk in, pull out your gun, and shoot him in the head, well, he obviously dies. But if you return a couple days later, you'll discover that the gunsmith is actually alive and well, just with a bandage wrapped around his head. How did he survive a bullet to the head? That's not explained, but I decided to take it even further. I repeated the procedure and came back a few days later. And what do I see? The same guy, standing there now without the head bandage, just a couple of scratches on his face. Basically, you can conclude that the gunsmith is immortal, and there's clearly some kind of mystery involved here. Night is the best time for strange and mysterious events. It's in the dark hours, embraced by darkness, that all secret and mystical things happen. If you head out at night from Valentine toward the town of Rhodes, right at the border between the two states, you'll witness an unusual phenomenon. Between 2 and 4 in the morning, while on the railroad tracks, you might get hit by a train. But it's not an ordinary one. This ghost train is empty. It carries no passengers and makes much less noise. You can still see sparks flying from under its wheels when it takes corners. If you're on horseback, your horse will get scared and try to move away from the tracks. But if you're standing on your own 2 feet and firmly decide not to move, nothing will happen. The train simply passes right through you. The waterfalls in the game are impressive not only for their scale and beauty, but also for their detailed design. And the most interesting detail about them is that if you have the patience to wait for a while, you can see fish falling down along with the water. Great way to gather yourself some lunch. In 2010, a YouTube video appeared showing a very strange bug from the first Red Dead Redemption, where a female NPC had a donkey's head instead of a human face. You could saddle her up and ride her around.
Now, the donkey woman likes to take us places. As you can see, she's very fast on her feet.
Players found a reference to this bug at this location where a woman with a donkey's face apparently died from exhausting work she was forced to do, which is extremely sad. However, if you don't know about this reference, it's pretty creepy. Here's the first, but not the last, detail in this video related to wagons. Mostly the game features ordinary, unremarkable wagons without various additional options. But on some of them, you can notice shock absorbers that actually work on bumps and make the coachman's life much more comfortable. And not only do they work, but some wagons in the game are also equipped with shock absorbers for the driver's seat, protecting their, well, backside. And yes, it works on bumps exactly the same way. Next is a detail I discovered completely by accident. It turns out you can shoot through the spokes on wagon wheels, and if you shoot off all of them, the wheel simply falls off. But the detail is deeper than it might seem. There's a difference between a wheel made entirely of wood or one with an iron rim. If it's wooden, it just falls off immediately. With an iron rim, first the rim itself bends and only then does the wheel fall off. I'm afraid to imagine how detailed everything related to cars will be in GTA 6. If you visit Cornwall's factory, you might notice that in some places oil is leaking from the pipes. Or maybe it's not oil, I don't know what it is. But whatever it is, it dirties the floor and leaves wet splotches. The coolest thing is that if you stand under this oil shower, it will also dirty your character. I even put on a white shirt to make it more visible. Surprisingly, a pipe like this is found only here. I'm almost certain you've never noticed the next detail. You can spot it in a camp you've set up. If you light a campfire and if you have the patience to watch it for an extended period, you'll see how the fire actually burns in real time, and the logs actually smolder. If you make a time lapse, it's clearly visible. Eventually, the logs burn down completely and the fire almost completely goes out. Just compare what it looked like when the fire was first lit, and how dim it became after several hours. Moving on. At this point on the map, there's a mysterious cabin where a strange sermon was held. The participants believed that their souls would leave their bodies and travel to the promised kingdom, while their earthly shells would remain here. Apparently, there was a mass poisoning at this location, and all that's left of the sermon participants is a pile of skeletons. Interestingly, all the skeletons have identical footwear, and it's exactly the same as that of the infamous sports team from Blackwater. The first thought that comes to mind is naive fools. They believed in some nonsense. But this thought might quickly disappear if you stay in this cabin until dark. Sometime after 2 in the morning, a strange event occurs. Everything inside becomes illuminated with a greenish light, and a humming sound comes from somewhere above. If you look up, you'll see a UFO. A flying saucer literally hovers over the cabin, but as soon as you exit, the saucer immediately flies away. According to a note left behind, it might be worth visiting Mount Shan at 2 in the morning. It's located right here. Climbing to the top, you'll see the flying saucer again, only this time it will be farther away. Honestly, I was simply shocked by the next detail. Imagine you're somewhere in the middle of the forest, your horse is who knows where, and you need to quickly get to some settlement. And instead of walking, you can stop some passing wagon and ask for a ride to the nearest town. Rockstar added this feature so you wouldn't have to compromise your honor by stealing someone's horse. Just imagine, the game is already more than 6 years old. I've been actively playing it for 4.5 years, and I learned about this feature literally last week. And that's the essence of the small details in RDR2. In the town of Annesburg, there's a coal mine, and various waste products are dumped directly from there into the local reservoir. The extent of how dirty the water is can best be seen from a bird's eye view. So, if you suddenly want to fish here, well, why not? I saw an NPC in St. Denis fishing in equally dirty water. You'll catch poisoned fish. You can even take a closer look at it from first-person view, and you can see how its scales are peeling off, and it clearly looks unhealthy. I wouldn't recommend eating it. Everyone already knows that if you throw a fire bottle at a tent, it gradually burns through. But there's another cool interaction with this fabric. If you take a throwing knife and throw it at a tent, you'll hear the characteristic sound of tearing fabric and see that the knife has actually passed through the tent fabric. Speaking of weapons, there are different types of throwing knives in the game, including ones with poisoned blades. Looking closer, you can see something green, resembling poison, actually applied to the blade. And I decided to check if there's some way to wash it off. And it turned out that yes, you can. The poison disappears from the blade if you throw the knife into water. I also tried simply wading into water above waist level and tried to wash off the poison that way. Unfortunately, it didn't work for me. By the way, there are also poisoned arrows in the game, which you can also see green poison on, but unlike the knife, it doesn't disappear from the arrow in water. In the game, you can meet NPCs who are chopping firewood. Of course, checking this detail will scare them away, but nevertheless, you can help a bit with this. If you take an axe and throw it at a not yet split log, you'll see that it actually works, and the wood splits into 2 pieces. Strawberry is the only town in the entire game that for some reason isn't connected to the electricity from the local power company. Even though absolutely every settlement, even in New Austin, is connected to the grid. Kerosene lamps still hang everywhere here, and literally not a single wire leads into the town. Perhaps this is because Strawberry is a tourist spot, and it's more profitable for business. Something like feeling at one with nature, but of course no one will ever know the real reason. You probably know that the temperature outdoors and indoors is different. The same applies when you approach a campfire. Well, the temperature even changes when you approach your own fire from a fire bottle. Although sometimes it's not entirely accurate. Here, for example, it showed me that in the place where Arthur is standing now, the temperature is 500 degrees Celsius. How he's standing there is not entirely clear. If you take a wagon, accelerate it, and try to brake sharply, you'll see how the horses stop and, accordingly, gradually slow down the wagon. But did you know that there's a vehicle in the game equipped with real brakes? And no, it's not a train. It's the blue US Army wagon. Upon closer inspection, you can get a good look at the design of this brake. As we can see, this lever is connected to 2 brakes on the rear wheels. And if you accelerate on this wagon, when you press the brake button, the rear wheels will actually lock up. It's a cool detail, of course, but it's a shame there's no animation of grabbing this handbrake. Did you know that you can fish not only with guns, explosives, or at worst a fishing rod, but also with throwing knives and even tomahawks? And if you're lucky, you can run over several fish right on your horse. Yes, they die just like small animals that get caught under hooves, so it turns out you can fish directly with your horse. If you first come to a place where some dog lives, let's say Emerald Ranch, then at your first meeting it won't pay any attention to you at all until you call it over. But if you pet and scratch it properly, the dog will remember that you treated it well, And the next time you come to this place, after a few days, the dog will run to you, wagging its tail as soon as it sees you. And naturally, it will beg you to pet it again. If you travel between towns, then at night, if you're lucky with the weather, you can clearly see the Milky Way. However, if you go into town, due to light pollution, the Milky Way will be much harder to see. And that's not all. Every day, the Milky Way changes its position in the sky. This is because the developers took into account the Earth's rotation, and each day the Milky Way is turned differently toward the player. It's simply amazing. There are many interesting additional locations in the game, and one of them is an abandoned church. An interesting interaction here is achieved through the bell installed at the top. The thing is, if there's no wind outside at all, there will be silence near the church. But if there's a hurricane outside, there's a chance that the wind's force will be enough to rock the bell, and it will start ringing throughout the area. Many people know that if you run out from the snowy mountains into a warm biome, steam comes off your horse due to temperature differences. But few know that the same effect can be achieved if you simply swim with your horse in ice-cold water. When exiting the water, again due to the temperature difference, steam will come off the horse. I think you've noticed that during shootouts, when an opponent drops a weapon from their hand, it fires on its own. The fact is that safety catches were invented 6 years after the events of RDR2, and even then, only on one revolver that's not in the game. By the way, using this feature, you can make opponents use their own weapons against themselves. And that's all the interesting details in RDR2 for today. If you like this format, support the video with a like and subscribe to the channel and I'll make a second part. And feel free to share any interesting details I might have missed. See you in the next video.